Hi, we'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. My name is Jason Newbold, and I'm with LinkSource Technologies. I want to start by giving you an idea of what we're going to cover today. In just a moment, I'll introduce the folks we have on the call. Then we're going to review who LinkSource is a bit, about our experience in the industry. We'll be talking about mobility strategy and mobile environments that we work within. Then we're going to have our partners at Visage, who are joining us, discuss some of the mobility trends that we see in the marketplace today. We'll talk to some of our lifecycle management services, and finally we'll close with a couple remarks and open it up to questions at the end. Just a note to everyone on the call, please feel free to use the chat window to ask your questions at any time. Our moderator will collect them and we'll attempt to get through them at the end of the meeting. If we do not get to your questions, we'll certainly have someone get back to all the attendees via an email after the meeting. So on our next slide, as I mentioned, I'm Jason Newbold. I'm the CSO for LinkSource Technologies. I have the overall responsibility for sales, operations, and ultimately the delivery of service to our clients. We also have Frank Mastro on. He's our Director of Sales for LinkSource. His team consists of the account management personnel that support our clients directly, and he'll be talking a little bit about customer environments and what we work within. And lastly, we have our partner Visage Mobile, as I mentioned, joining us, and Steve Prince, who is the VP of Customer Operations. Visage is our partner that provides the software platform and statistics that allow us to deliver clients the end results. Steve will be providing a brief overview on some of those statistics that we use and see in the market today. So I want to start by, on the next slide, giving you a little bit of an overview on LinkSource and some of our experience. We've been in business for over 15 years, and as you can see from some of the statistics up there, we work with over 600 clients, and they range in size from small customers up to very large Fortune 500 companies. The benefit of this to our clients is that it allows us to better understand what clients of similar size, scope, and geography are doing, and what price points, contract terms, and services are being leveraged in the market today within your voice, data, and mobile environments. You'll hear more today how visibility is a key and really a first step in the process to allow your company to make the best decisions. I know stating visibility is a key sounds obvious, but a lot of clients don't have that today, and that's what we try to help them with. I'm going to hand it over to Frank to discuss a little bit more on the customer environments that we see and how we can leverage, how you can leverage, our tools and experience to drive not only better cost structure within your mobility environment, but also drive an overall better process, hopefully, to ensure cost structures stay competitive moving forward. So Frank, I'm going to turn it over to you on the next slide here.
Thanks, Jason. I appreciate that. And you said it best. I think obviously visibility is key, and it seems to be common sense. And something else that everyone seems to agree on is mobility is a very fluid environment. It's constantly changing. What companies are most interested in these days is understanding ways to reduce their current costs, create visibility, policies, and ongoing management to avoid overspending in the future. What companies first need to understand is the current state of their mobility environment, and we like to categorize these environments, as you can see here, ranging from chaotic to strategic, or as we like to refer to it, as a non-managed environment to a fully managed environment. And really what a customer needs to understand, or companies, is first off, where do they fall within their range? In order to understand that, we'll dig a little bit deeper into each one of these environments. So looking at non-managed environments, into something that Jason alluded to earlier, there's no visibility into your spend. There's no visibility into data or voice overages, no visibility into feature equipment charges, if you have roaming or not. There's no visibility into your current rate or discount structure. Do you have individual plans? Are you on shared or pool plans? Do you know if your rates are competitive? There's no policies managing the governance of your devices. Who's allowed to order and who's not? How is that managed? What is the process for employees who are going to be traveling? Are there company applications on these devices, and if so, are they managed? So the first step is really to gain that visibility that we're talking about. Know your current contract state and your rates. Understand, are they competitive? Are you under the correct rate structure? Understand what devices you have and how they're being used and deployed. Is it email only? Are there company applications? Perhaps just casual internet browsing. Second is to manage your environment on a daily, weekly, and monthly basis. How were devices ordered? How were bills paid? And their accountability for their spend. And this is where a WEM, or a wireless expense management tool, becomes very critical, and we'll talk about that a little bit later in our presentation. And how is your account structured? Last but not least is getting to that fully managed or strategic environment. In this environment, you have complete visibility. You have resources in place to manage your environments. You have created a defined mobility policy for employees to follow. And you have tools and resources necessary to regulate your environment and keep it optimized. What I'm going to do now is turn it over to our partners at Vicious, and they're going to talk about some trends in the marketplace that's really driving where you will fall within these environments.
Thanks, Frank.
Steve?
This is Steve Prince from Visage. And as Jason said in the opening, Visage is a technology company. It's also important to note, though, that we're focused solely on doing exceptional things with mobile spend data. And I'm going to share with you some of those insights that we have in the wireless industry and how those insights help our partners like LinkSource and ultimately help you save money. So if there's probably one thing we can all agree on, it's the usage patterns are definitely changing in wireless. I'm sure you see it in your own business. You're probably seeing less voice, less text, probably more data usage. So first, look at the graph on the left for me. It shows the decline in voice minutes per line, and each line denotes a carrier. So the first thing you notice is that they're all sloping down at about the same rate. And these uniform declines like this are usually indicative of a highly commoditized service. So what I mean by that in just plain old English is probably no one is selecting carriers based on the voice service alone. And what this has done is this has effectively led to a price reduction on voice services, and the carriers are responding by bundling unlimited voice, text, things of that nature into their offers. And you can see that, for example, in the Verizon Share Everything plans. AT&T has a family of plans that are very similar. And really, carriers have done this for years. They'll bundle in order to fix a premium to the price before that price goes to zero. You see it in your home phone service. If you've got a triple play at home, you know that the home phone service is a very small portion of that triple play. In the late 90s, the wireless carriers started doing it with roaming, domestic roaming. And in 2015, now we're down to wireless voice service. That's the next thing being bundled in. So now take a look at the graph on the right. And here we're looking at megabytes used per line. Data usage is increasing, but you can tell it's increasing at very different rates across the carriers. Each one of those lines denotes a carrier. You can see Verizon and AT&T are amongst the highest usage, while the two value providers that give unlimited and fixed rate pricing are actually near the bottom of usage. So, I mean, that's pretty interesting to me. I would have thought, and maybe you would too, that those, if you have unlimited, you have lower pricing, that usage should be through the roof. But it's not. So looking at the data, what we can say about this usage pattern is it's probably not driven by selection bias, because the two carriers who tout the best deals on data plans actually have the lowest usage. So you can probably conclude that usage is really a function of network quality, and specifically a good LTE footprint. So the better the speed and connection, the more data service is used. So here's the implication here for you today, is if you give your employees access to better networks, they're going to consume more data. And if mobility is a strategic differentiator in your business, it means the quality of the carrier's data network should be the key item that you make your purchase decisions with. So on this slide, to recap, in the year 2015, data is more important than voice. Probably not a shocker to anybody. But I think this next slide coming up is probably going to surprise you. Next slide, please. So if you would, please fix your attention on the graph to the left. We're going to discuss the effective cost per megabyte. So the effective cost per megabyte is based on the price and how much you use of the service. So that gives you effectively what you are paying per megabyte. So I can tell you this, when it comes to buying data, usage is generally the biggest driver of value. So if you look at the red line on the graph, you're probably going to be surprised at who has the lowest effective cost per megabyte. That is Verizon up there in the red. As I'm sure you all know, Verizon's usually considered a premium service, but as you can see, users pay the least per gigabyte of data consumed. Now, this is probably something you would expect if you're only looking at the retail price of plans. You should be careful when making decisions based on price rather than a combination of the price plan and the actual consumption, because that will drive down your effective cost. So another way of saying this, if your typical user is using 1.5 gigs of data per month, it doesn't matter how great of a deal the carrier gives you on a 5 gig plan relative to the 3 gig plan, because buying a bigger plan is just driving up the effective cost of your gigabytes. So having data like this when you're making purchase decisions is critical. Otherwise, you're going to find yourself optimizing for price rather than cost. So the other thing to watch out for is you need to think about consuming wireless on a user level rather than on a device level. So just to clarify those terms, a user is a person, obviously, and devices, most users have multiple devices. Generally, 1.5 devices or so is what we see assigned out to them. But the other thing we're seeing is the number of devices per user is increasing. And shared or pooled plans allow you to avoid the cost of multiple individual data subscriptions. So back to the slide here, take a look at the blue table on the right. So effectively what this is saying is though the per gigabyte price is higher for pooled data than it is for individual plans, when you look at the actual effective cost per gigabyte, the cost is actually quite a bit lower. And that's even true with just moderately utilized pools. So take a look at the green section below in the table, and I'm just going to read it verbatim. So even with average pool utilization of only 43%, the effective cost per gigabyte of data in the pool is 32% lower than with individual plans. It's pretty shocking. And 43% isn't fantastic utilization either. And that's where a smart company like LinkSource can come in and help drive down your costs even further. But to summarize, if you want the most value, you need to buy data based on consumption and not the price. And where you can, use pool or share plans as well. So my next slide is also one that's pretty counterintuitive. And this one's around roaming. And I'll explain what I mean about the term two-sided breakage here at the top of the slide in just a moment. But roaming is the element of the bill that can have the most variability, and it will strike fear into almost any mobility administrator. And honestly, because of that fear factor, it can lead to less than optimal decisions. So here's what we found. Roamers as a group will cost your company 4 times more than what a non-roamer will. And that's just not in the month what they actually roamed, but across all months. So it seemed pretty interesting to us. So we looked at some data to figure out what was driving the cost. And if you take a look at the left-hand graph for me, it shows the effective cost per minute for roamers. Okay? So now look at the pink line at the top, and that's T-Mobile. They had the highest effective cost per minute, which seemed pretty counterintuitive to me, because they're supposed to be the flat rate international roaming leader owned by a foreign company, right? Supposedly they have this roaming thing all figured out. So pretty counterintuitive. So we drilled a little further into the data, and here's where that fear factor comes in. It turns out a typical attribute of roamers is that they subscribe to an unlimited roaming feature. So the scenario kind of plays out like this. So you have a user, they go on a trip, they come back with, let's say, a $600 roaming charge. And they say, oh, I don't want that to happen again. So what they'll do is they'll go and subscribe to an unlimited roaming plan for $80 a month, which is fine and good. But the big question is how often does the average business person go abroad? So luckily for us at Visage, Concur has an ownership stake in us, and they just happen to book millions of business trips per year, so it was pretty easy for us to figure it out from our friends at Concur. And I can tell you that the typical business traveler takes an international trip once every 14 months, okay? So if you're paying $80 a month times 14 months, that's over $1,100 just to make sure you don't get another $600 roaming bill. So not very smart. And this is really what we mean by two-sided breakage there at the top of the slide. The carrier's going to get you either way. Either you pay too much when you use roaming without a roaming plan, or you often pay even more when you leave the roaming plan on every month just to ensure you're mitigating the charges that might happen once every 14 months. Seems pretty unfair. But the right way to address the two-sided breakage on roaming is to bring together two sets of data. And those are travel itineraries and mobile user data. That way you know, one, when someone's about to travel, and two, you can make the necessary adjustments depending on the usage profile. So again, using our data and our technology, our friends at LinkSource can help you mitigate this issue. And if you're interested in learning more about international roaming mitigation, they can tell you more after the webinar. So on my last slide, basically what you can see here is better data helps drive better decisions and ultimately lower your costs. So how low? Typically about 17% is what we call controllable costs, meaning you can take costs out of the service without an adverse impact on the experience. So what you've learned over the last few slides is that the drivers of mobility spend aren't always obvious and intuitive. And I got to tell you, they're crafted that way on purpose. The carriers are very smart cookies, and they have sophisticated marketing programs, sales efforts, and all that good stuff to help your purchase decisions become a lot more blurry. So to combat the smoke screens and mirrors, you need access to great data, which, as you can see here from the last few slides, LinkSource does. And the savings potential is huge, but you need to start by looking at what the data actually says about your mobile environment. So with that, I'm going to pass it back over to Jason to discuss how they use the data I just discussed and other data sources to help save you money in the life cycle management process. Jason?
Thanks, Steve. And thanks for the kind words. I know when you said the smart people at LinkSource, you weren't talking about me. But fortunately, we have a good group of folks in our office that do a lot of this analysis. So thank you. All right. So on this slide, I think we're going to break this out here over the next couple slides. But looking at life cycle management, what we're really talking about, right, is not just taking one component, but looking at your entire environment and helping manage the entire environment. And the way we break this out is really between cost savings and cost avoidance. Cost savings, very obviously, is about reducing your spend, as Steve alluded to before. That is about taking the $120 a device and bringing it down in cost per device. Cost avoidance, a little bit more complex. Cost avoidance, we're talking about something that isn't necessarily driving down your costs, but trying to control the costs as you go forward. So I'm going to break these out in the next couple slides and discuss why each of these are important to our clients. I think going on to the next slide, let's just jump right into the cost savings. So cost savings, one of the first things we want to look at is a client's mobility policies, or maybe lack thereof. As you heard from Frank, if there isn't a policy in place, then really there's no direction being set. So we try to work with the clients to develop and understand what the policies are. And as an example, we want to look at policies around device types. Who can order what devices? Is text messaging required in your environment? So these are things, right, that we want to understand about the environment, set policies in place when people are traveling internationally. So we work with our clients on that. Once again, you heard from Steve, the largest spend is typically roamers. And thus, we want to ensure that we have policies and the enforcement of those policies in place. Second, as mentioned, we review the data collection of all our clients. Like I mentioned earlier, we have 600 clients. Visage, their repository of data that they've gathered through the software, and we ensure that price points and services are aligned with your environment. It's not a one-size-fits-all. You may have different requirements in your environment than the next client. So we work with you on that. If not, we'll use that to leverage better pricing through a competitive RFP or a simple negotiation with the carriers. Lastly, once any pricing and contracts have been implemented, we want to validate that proper charges and credits are applied through the first bill review. It typically takes 1 to 2 months, as any of you that have done this before understand that the prorating of services may take a couple of bill cycles to kind of all pan out and play out. All right, so moving on to the next slide, looking at cost avoidance. So as mentioned, right, cost savings is meant to realize immediate cost reduction. Cost avoidance is really meant to ensure costs don't continue to escalate over time as your mobility environment changes. The difference between fixed line services and mobile line services is they're usage sensitive. Your data network, you put it in place, there is no usage sensitive service to it. In a mobile environment, you have changes that take place. So one of the ways that we do this is ensure there's a clear process in place around the procurement and fulfillment of devices, as well as the services within the mobility environment. So we work with clients to establish a process, and we can either provide fulfillment and help desk support, or we help our clients develop that process internally. And this will just help ensure, for example, that you don't have users going out of your contracts and potentially ordering devices, changing plans, et cetera, that aren't being included properly or correct rates within your carrier contracts. On the previous slide, we discussed benchmarking of pricing and ensuring plans were set up based on current consumption. But again, as mobility is ever changing, this has to be managed ongoing. And we've actually seen clients that have come in, audited the environment, cleaned it all up. Over the course of a year, literally their spend has doubled, and they haven't added a single device to the environment. As a matter of fact, they've actually eliminated devices, but it's doubled because of traffic pattern changes. So overages, roamers, as was alluded to earlier, can affect that if it's not managed ongoing. So we want to ensure, for that reason, that the policies aren't just in place, but they're complied with. Also, we see many customers wait for contracts to come up before negotiating with the carrier. That said, we've had great success helping clients renegotiate their contracts midterm with the carriers when there's been significant changes to price plans within that environment. So if you look over the last couple of years alone, I think Steve mentioned this, we've seen carriers change from individual pooling on data or individual plans on data to pooled environments on data, and it's made a significant change in cost to many clients. If you're not working to negotiate those prior to contract expiration, it could impact you 10, 20% on a monthly basis. So, those are things that you want to manage ongoing and not wait until contracts come up to do that. Lastly, most of you have heard about telecom expense management, TEM or WEM, some of the benefits and candidly some of the issues that go along with it. But if deployed and managed properly, it can significantly impact spend. Being able to track and sort spend by user and department, giving managers and end users visibility as discussed, helps curb the bad behavior within your mobility environment. And also the software can help set thresholds. This is one of the great things about us working with Visage. There are certain thresholds that can be set. We can pull out your top users, and what we found is usually your top 10 to 20% of your users are driving 40, 50% of the costs. So if you can identify and impact those users, they're going to have the greatest impact on your overall cost. All right, so moving on to the next slide. This is a sample of some of the reports and assessment reports that we run with new and existing clients. All of these reports are driven out of the Visage platform and loaded in via an EDI feed from the carriers. So what this really requires from a client side is access to your carrier environment for us to do this assessment, LOAs, your login passwords, so we can log in, pull down the data, look at it in these reports, and look at the trends that are going on within your environment, and it really just candidly helps pull out some of the low-hanging fruit that is in your environment. And then from there, we kind of dig a little deeper with our clients, and we'll look at things such as pooling of plans, putting acre plans in certain states and regions where it may be beneficial from tax standpoints. So again, these reports can be useful in not only getting a better understanding in your environment today, but also to show where you're headed from a consumption standpoint. As you heard from Steve earlier, that is a shifting environment. So with that, I'd like to thank you all for joining us today. We're going to open things up for questions. And again, you can type in the chat window. We'll do our best to answer them today. Anything that isn't answered here, we will respond via an email to attendees. So Beth, I think I'm going to turn it over to you, and let me know if there's any questions that have come in thus far. Thank you.
Thanks, Jason. Yes, we actually do have a first question. First question being, we've been looking at going to BYOD for some time now. Can you tell me if your clients have gone this direction and how you feel it's impacted them?
Yeah, so great question. We talk to clients today, and we've been talking to them for years about this. I don't think there is a client that we've talked to that hasn't considered BYOD in their environment. Some have actually moved to it with success, and some have had issues with it and candidly moved back to a company-owned plan. One of the big issues, right, with and why companies look at BYOD as cost savings, but one of the big issues is around the security of the devices. If you put that in the hands of your employees, you need a way to secure those devices, and that's where things like MDM come into play and need to be looked at in order to control, a lost device, an employee leaving the company. You need to be able to pull that data off of that device. You still have the issue, though, in a BYOD potentially of, the employee now owns the phone, and you're being able to wipe the entire device with personal information potentially of the employees. So it becomes a big risk that, again, there needs to be policies and documentations in place, and that's what we kind of work with our clients on, is understanding what those policies need to be and what you need to put in place if you're going to go that direction. And again, typically why most clients are doing this is for cost savings. You can certainly save money by simply putting the ownership on the employee for the cost of the device and monthly with no reimbursement. But most of our clients that go this direction end up doing it to just kind of flat rate, if you will, their wireless environment. So instead of having all these variable roamers, overages, et cetera, they just pay a stipend out to the client. And what we found is, if you're going to pay out $100 per device to your end users and let them manage that, you still have to manage the security of that device. There's still a lot of work and effort that go into it. And the individual users can't drive down the cost like you can as a company as a whole. So again, I'm not saying one is better than the other, but those are the things you want to look out when you're looking at BYOD. And again, you would have to look at your individual situation to understand what you're looking for. Thanks, Beth. Any others?
Great, thanks, Jason. Yes, we have one more question. Okay. Can you provide an overview of how you propose to engage with a new client and how you charge for your services?
Yeah, sure. So this is kind of a setup question, it sounds like, but I appreciate it. So as mentioned, we understand kind of in the market today, listen, everyone says they're going to save you money, and candidly, you can save money with or without some of the visibility that we've shown you here today and without some of these processes we discussed today. But in order to get the most out of the mobile environment, we've seen these processes that we followed with our clients net the best overall results, first and foremost. What we typically do is we start by providing, as mentioned today, kind of a no-risk, if you will, assessment of your environment. And it kind of gives us all, both the client and ourselves, a good baseline of who your carriers are, what plans are currently in place, overages, zero usage, things along those lines. And once we do this, we sit down with the clients to better understand the processes, policies, help desks, things like that that are currently in place, and we'll determine where improvements can be made. To this point, we don't charge anything for our services. This is more of a discovery for both sides. If a client wants to proceed from there, we determine kind of what services at that point are most beneficial, and we'll look at it. Kind of it's two different items that we look at. So there's more one-time projects, and then there's the ongoing management and support of the mobility environment. So one-time projects are things like auditing of your environment. So we come in, right, take a look at what you've got, put you into this, into the Visage platform, review it, and that is typically done on a shared savings model, if you will. So we'll take a look at what you've got, we'll take a look at your pricing, see where you fall, and then we'll make recommendations, and we'll even fulfill and procure, if you want us to, the changes to those devices. Another thing we'll do is a lot of clients just want some help with the developing of policies. So that's more of a one-time engagement. We'll do that for them on a project basis. The last thing that's kind of a one-time project-based work is just contract negotiation. A lot of clients just don't know where their price point should be. They know it's down 2% from where it was last year through the negotiation, but they don't know if 15%, 18% discounts are the right discounts. So we'll come in, help benchmark that, and then help them negotiate that through the carriers. On more of an ongoing basis, we'll do things like I mentioned earlier, so help desk, fulfillment of devices, billing support, so WEM, TEM services. We'll provide MDM and MDM support. And you know, in those services, we'll really do those more on a per device basis, which is pretty standard in the industry. So those are really the two things. I know we're running up against time here. We want to be sensitive to everybody's time. So I think we've got another question or two, but we're going to have to reply to those via an email. We appreciate everybody's time today. If you have any questions, please, up on the slide right now, or the email addresses of the folks on the call here today, feel free to send us an email, and we'd be more than happy to answer any questions. Thank you again. We look forward to working with you.